No more shrinking. You sealed this during Lilith's last passage, or at least you felt it inside, even without typing it. Lilith left the dungeon, screamed the no that had been stuck in your throat for years, and you recognized, I no longer fit into the small version of myself. Today, Saturn Trine Lilith arrives as the continuation of that moment. If yesterday was the scream, today is the contract. If yesterday was emotion, today is structure. The sky isn't asking if you have the courage to feel. It's asking if you have the courage to sustain. Before Saturn arrived, Lilith already showed you the bill. The exhaustion of holding everything, the guilts that aren't yours, the relationships in which you shrink to fit, the environments where you always become the most understanding, the most available, the most flexible. You saw the price. Saturn now doesn't come to add more weight. He comes to help set a border. He is the planet that takes seriously what you take seriously. If you have decided to respect yourself, he comes to build a fence around that decision. Today, the question isn't, do you deserve more? You already know you do. The question is, what in your concrete life will change because you said that no? In which relationship, in which dynamic, in which routine are you ready to honor the boundary Lilith asked for? If you feel this turning point needs to become a commitment, seal this pact in the comments. I honor my boundaries. Before Saturn arrived, Lilith already showed you the bill. The no more shrinking didn't come from nowhere. It came after years of being the person who holds everything, who understands everyone, who swallows their own pain to not weigh down the environment. The decision to no longer diminish yourself isn't born in someone who was always respected. It is born precisely in someone who spent too much time occupying less space than they needed to fit others' expectations. Think of the scenes where you held back, the conversation where you had something important to say, but rearranged the words so as not to seem too harsh. The situation where you perceived the abuse, the imbalance, the disrespect, and still put yourself last because someone had to endure it. The times you put in double the effort in silence while others rested on your goodwill. Lilith shined a spotlight on these dynamics. Saturn now asks you to see the cost. This price isn't theoretical. It appears in the tired body, the light sleep, the irritation that explodes in small moments, the feeling of always owing someone something. It appears in the difficulty of receiving help, the strangeness when someone treats you with real care as if it were wrong to take up space. It appears in the way you got used to explaining yourself for existing. Sorry for asking, sorry to bother, sorry for feeling. Living small creates a silent debt with your own soul, and Lilith came to collect this bill. When you said, no more shrinking, inwardly or by writing it, it wasn't a spiritual slogan. It was an enough to the repetition of choices that always put you in the smaller place. But there's a catch. The pattern of shrinking is old. It was trained for years. You learned to read the room, to perceive people's moods, to adjust so that no one felt threatened by your intensity, your clarity, your strength. It's a survival reflex, and reflexes don't just disappear because you woke up to them. Saturn enters right here, in the space between I don't want this anymore and I still act as if I do. He is the planet that shows that every decision has a price, including the decision to respect yourself. If before the cost was carrying too much weight, now the cost will be holding the line when someone finds your new size strange. If before you paid with exhaustion, now you might pay with discomfort, with silences, with sour faces, with people saying you've changed. The question is, which price do you consider more expensive in the long run? Looking at the past with Saturn isn't about blaming yourself for having shrunk. It's about recognizing the context in which that was the only way to keep belonging. In many moments, dimming your own light was the strategy that kept you alive in environments where being whole would have been dangerous. Honoring that is important. At the same time, remaining in that strategy when awareness already exists becomes self-abandonment. Life is offering you another level. Lilith showed this with a scream. Saturn arrives to ask if you are willing to sustain this level in your daily life. The old price of shrinking, you already know by heart. It's the exhaustion of always being the strong side, the understanding side, the conscious side, while on the inside, you wither. It's the frustration of seeing those who don't give even half of what you do, occupying places you don't occupy for fear of bothering. It's the feeling of living a tight life, where there's always a slight lack of air. Today, Saturn places his hand on this point and says, now that you know this, continuing as you are is also a choice. This first chapter isn't for you to make immediate decisions. It's for you to look with Saturn's lucidity at the true cost of the size you had been accepting. Because without feeling this weight clearly, any commitment to change becomes just a phrase. And today's transit doesn't want more phrases. It wants a life that, little by little, stops treating you as if you were smaller than you really are. Saturn has a bad reputation. Many people hear his name and immediately think of punishment, weight, demands, harshness. But when he trines Lilith, the role is different. He isn't coming to put you back in the dungeon. He is coming to build the structure that prevents you from being pushed back in there again. If Lilith is the I no longer accept diminishing myself to fit in, Saturn is the so let's see how you organize your life based on that. Think of someone you respect because they keep their word, not because they are perfect, but because when they say no, it's no. When they say yes, you feel it's true. Saturn, in a good expression, is this energy. He is not impressed by emotional speeches, by promises of a turnaround, by an "it's happening now" that lasts 3 days. He observes what is repeated. He is the planet that asks, what do you do every Monday? How do you react every time so-and-so crosses the line? Where do you revert to the old pattern even after saying it was over? In contact with Lilith, Saturn looks at your no more shrinking and replies, okay, so from today on, this goes on the list of things you take seriously. He is not interested in shaming you for what you tolerated until now. What's done is done. The focus now is, if you have truly decided not to diminish yourself anymore, this needs to show up in 3 places: in time, in form, and in consequence. In time, meaning, how long do you sustain your own boundary? Do you say no today, only to go back on it tomorrow because someone cried, insisted, created drama, or blamed you? Saturn, as an ally, will show you these reversals. Not to call you weak, but so you can see where you are still afraid to own your own size. He invites you to endure the discomfort of not backing down at the first sign of disapproval. This muscle is built with practice, not theory. In form, Saturn helps transform Lilith's energy into a visible contour. It's not enough to feel that something crossed the line. It needs to be named, even if simply, I don't do this anymore, I don't accept this type of comment. This time no longer exists for me. I won't talk about this subject in these terms. It can be a boundary stated calmly, without screaming, without threats, but it needs to be clear enough for you yourself to know when you've crossed it. Saturn participates exactly there, in the clarity of the form, in the short sentence, in the internal rule. You know when you've broken. In consequence, he reminds you that every real no reorganizes the field. If you stop being always available, someone will miss it. If you stop accepting certain dynamics, some relationships will reveal themselves for what they are. If you stop playing the role of emotional cushion, some conflicts you were holding alone will appear. Saturn doesn't create these consequences to punish you. He simply doesn't mask what already existed. When you remove your presence from a place where it was exploited, what that place truly is becomes visible. To see Saturn as an ally is to understand that he is on the side of the part of you that wants to be taken seriously. The same part that signs important contracts, that takes care of what is sacred, that knows certain decisions are points of no return. When he trines Lilith, he is saying, this intensity, this truth, this refusal to shrink, I recognize it. Let's give it a ground, a schedule, an agreement, a way to exist in the world. Therefore, in this transit, there's no use trying to deal with Saturn as you would a punitive father. He is not on the outside judging you. He is your adult, spiritual, and human part, rising up to protect your wild, wounded, and true part, which Lilith represents. It is as if the soul was saying, I will no longer let them talk to my Lilith just any way. I will no longer put her in scenarios where she needs to mutilate herself to stay. And Saturn replies, then let's write this into the routine. When you start to feel Saturn as an ally, something changes in the perception of weight. It stops being the weight of carrying the world on your shoulders and becomes the weight of a serious alliance. It's not childish lightness, it's stability. It's knowing that if you said you won't shrink anymore, there is an internal force that will remind you of this when the temptation to return to the old way appears. Not to humiliate you, but to remind you who you decided to be. There is a type of boundary that lives in the phrase, and another that lives in the form. The first you know well. It's the enough, the I can't anymore, the not like this. It appears in vents, in deep conversations, in long audio messages. It is often true, born from an honest point of exhaustion or lucidity. But if it isn't accompanied by some concrete change, it just becomes a strong moment within a scenario that remains the same. The transit of Saturn Trine Lilith is inviting you to take these spoken boundaries and elevate some of them to the level of internal law. A spoken boundary is one that depends on the day's mood. If you're tired, you say no. If you're feeling guilty, you say, it's fine. If the other person insists, you become flexible. It's a boundary that sways in the wind, and not because you don't have truth, but because you still feel you need to be loved, accepted, or understood more than you need to be faithful to yourself. Saturn doesn't judge this. He just shows you how much this leaves you vulnerable to any external pressure. One more request, a crisis, tears, a threat of withdrawal, and the boundary dissolves. A structured boundary is different. It doesn't depend so much on the emotional state of the moment because it was placed in a more objective place. Time, frequency, condition, distance. Instead of I can't stand being everyone's support anymore, it becomes, after such and such a time, I do not handle this type of demand. Instead of "you don't respect me," it becomes "I will no longer participate in conversations where this type of comment occurs. So if it happens, I will remove myself." Instead of "I can't handle this volume of work," it becomes "from now on, my limit is X clients, X hours, X days." Saturn asks for this kind of translation, not because he is rigid for pleasure, but because he knows that without form, your enough just becomes emotional temperature. One day it boils, the next it cools, and life continues to treat you as before. When you choose a boundary to level up, you are telling yourself, "This stops being a vent and becomes a new rule of existing with me." It's not about the other person first, it's about the pact you make with your own energy. Of course, this has implications. Some people will adapt to the new format. They'll find it strange at first, maybe test you, but they'll end up understanding that with you, this is how it is now. Others might pull away, get hurt, accuse you of coldness, selfishness, harshness. This is where the Trine to Lilith manifests. It strengthens the part of you that prefers to deal with the truth of relationships rather than stay trapped in agreements that only existed because you accepted diminishing yourself. A structured boundary doesn't come to destroy bonds. It comes to reveal which bonds can survive your wholeness. You don't need to turn your entire life into a set of rigid rules. Saturn isn't asking for that. What this transit is asking is that in at least one specific area, you stop depending on the willpower of the moment and create a minimal contour that protects you even on the days when you are most vulnerable. It could be in family, at work, in the way you give spiritually, in the time you offer. To choose a boundary to level up is to choose a place in your life that will no longer be available for negotiations that diminish you. The question Saturn leaves in this chapter is simple and direct. Which of your boundaries has been stated 1,000 times, and precisely because of that, deserves to stop being talk and become structure? That is where his energy wants to work with your Lilith. Not in a prettier speech, but on a concrete, visible edge that signals to you and the world. From here on, it's different. Every transit remains abstract until it touches a concrete area of your life. Saturn Trine Lilith only becomes a turning point when you choose where exactly this alliance will manifest first. Not in theory, but in form. Instead of trying to fix everything, the invitation is to choose one territory: how you give of yourself, how much you endure, what you accept in relationships, or what you tolerate at work, and within it, establish a simple clause. Here, I do not go back. Let's start with the way you give of yourself. Maybe you are the person who always says, "I've got this." You take on tasks, pains, emotional processes that are not yours. Each time, you think it's just this once, but before you know it, you are carrying packages that belong in other hands. The Lilith-Saturn commitment here could be something like, "I will no longer take on alone responsibilities that belong to everyone." This can turn into a concrete gesture. When a shared problem arises, instead of saying, "I'll solve it," you start asking, "How can each of us contribute?" In the field of how much you endure, the pattern is usually different. You endure until your body screams. You put up with impossible schedules, invasive conversations, repeated demands, thinking that having limits is a sign of weakness. In this territory, the commitment might be, "From today on, I respect the first sign of exhaustion, not the last." In practice, this might mean ending a call when you realize you're drained, adjusting the number of clients or tasks per day, refusing to participate in something when you already feel the day before that it will run you over. In relationships, the pact might touch on how you accept being treated. Comments you always overlooked, small depreciations, comparisons, jokes at your expense, emotional invasions normalized because that's just how the person is. Here, a Lilith-Saturn clause could be, I do not stay in environments where I repeatedly need to shrink for the other person to feel comfortable. This doesn't mean exploding everything, but starting to withdraw from certain conversations, reducing your presence in certain spaces, or calmly naming when something disrespects you. At work, the commitment might involve the line between the professional and the personal, between what is a fair expectation and what is an exploitation of your goodwill. Maybe you learned to be the one who solves it, no matter the cost. The pact then could be, I deliver my best within a human limit, not at the expense of myself. In practical terms, this could be establishing response times, refusing tasks that don't belong to your role, or admitting you need support where you previously pretended to handle it all. The most important thing is that this clause be specific and honest, not heroic. It doesn't need to be grandiose, it needs to be true. Here, I do not go back, doesn't mean you will never fail again. It means that when you fail, you will remember this agreement and return to it, instead of abandoning your own decision at the first difficulty. Saturn enters as a witness. He registers this commitment, and on the days when the old way of shrinking seems easier, he will remind you why you chose differently. A Lilith-Saturn commitment is not a dramatic oath. It is a change of foundation. It is the moment when you stop seeing your integrity as something optional, negotiable, and start treating it as something that organizes the rest. From today on, in one specific area, your truth stops being a visitor and becomes a permanent resident. And it is from this dwelling that the rest of life will have to rearrange itself. When an internal commitment truly begins to take effect, you feel it on the inside before you do on the outside. The first sign that Saturn is sealing your Lilith is not that everyone will suddenly respect you. On the contrary, often what comes first is a test. People who are used to your, sure, I'll do it, will try to repeat the script. Old situations return, packaged in a new way. The difference is that now, at the crucial moment, something in you hesitates before agreeing. It's no longer automatic. There is a second of consciousness between the request and the response. This small interval is already Saturn at work. Another sign is that you start to listen to yourself better after interactions. Before, you would leave some conversations exhausted and just enter the next one without even naming what you felt. Now you begin to notice, when I say yes to this, I leave smaller. When I accept this type of comment, I feel like I'm betraying something in me. This self-listening is not victimization. It's energetic accounting. You begin to register with more precision, where you are enhanced and where you are diminished. It is also common for the need to explain yourself to decrease. Instead of long speeches to justify a boundary, you find yourself using simpler phrases. I can't today. This doesn't work for me. I'm not on board with it this way. Guilt might come later. You might mentally review what you said. But unlike before, these phrases begin to exist in the world, and with time, you realize that not everything falls apart when you take a stand. Some people back off, others find it strange, others respect you more. A quieter but profound sign is the internal adjustment in your idea of responsibility. You begin to realize that you are not responsible for everyone's reactions, nor for the maintenance of all dynamics. That being a present and loving person does not require you to be always available for everything. Saturn seals Lilith when you understand that saying no to what destroys you is, in fact, saying yes to the part of you that wants to stay alive and whole enough to continue serving what matters. When these signs appear, the interval before responding, the self-listening after, the shortening explanation, the reorganizing responsibility, it's because the transit has stopped being astrological theory and started to become a way of being in the world. This is how Saturn confirms your decision to no longer shrink is beginning to grow a spine. Some movements in life are a phase. They pass, teach something, and remain as a memory. Others change the very foundation upon which you walk. The gentle encounter between Saturn and Lilith points to this second type. It's not just that period when I was angrier, firmer, more full of no. It is the beginning of a new architecture within, where the part that refuses to diminish itself stops being a visitor and becomes structure. Until now, Lilith often appeared as an explosion. You endured, and one day the outburst would come, an argument, a sharp break, a radical decision. Afterward, guilt would come, and you would try to return to your previous size. Now with Saturn alongside, the invitation is different. Instead of depending on moments of saturation, you begin to adjust your daily life. It's no longer about always breaking away, it's about not building the same prison again. To treat Lilith as foundation is to ask, what kind of life am I building around my truth? It's realizing that it's no use defending your own worth in a deep speech if, in practice, you continue to accept arrangements that deny it. It's observing if your calendar, your home, your relationships, and your way of working are minimally aligned with the size you know you have. Over time, something changes in how you see yourself. You stop seeing yourself merely as someone who took a beating from life and has now reacted, and start to recognize yourself as someone who is building an adult path for their own strength. The wound remains part of the story, but it stops being the sole commander. Lilith, then, is no longer just the point of pain and rebellion. She is the living memory that you were born to occupy your full space. And Saturn, in this transit, helps you make this space not an isolated moment of courage, but the ground upon which you choose to walk from now on. If you've made it this far, you've already seen that this isn't just about being strong or learning to say no. Lilith showed you the point where you shrank for years to fit others' expectations. Saturn, today, arrived to remind you that self-respect is not a feeling, it is form. It's in the hours you accept, the conversations you stay in, the burdens you no longer take on alone. You don't need to become another person overnight, but you do need to admit, with adult honesty, that continuing to shrink is also a choice, and that, from now on, in at least one area of your life, that choice no longer matches who you are becoming. Saturn didn't come to punish you for having shrunk. He came to help you protect the size that has finally begun to appear. If this video helped you see more clearly where your boundaries deserve to level up, remember to leave a like and subscribe to the channel. This keeps this kind of conversation circulating for those who also need to structure their own truth. And if today you decide to honor at least one of your frontiers, seal this commitment in the comments by writing, "I honor my boundaries Take care of this line as you would take care of your own ground. We'll see each other in the next video.